Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 90s. Sorry if you hear dogs barking in the background. It's not mine yet. It's dogs outside. I got the door open. I guess it's a nice day. Cloudy and stuff, but anyway, we're not here about today. We're over here about 1998. We're going back to November of 1998. A lot going on in this one, so got a lot to cover this week. Do want to mention a bonus episode came out last week, all about back to school, my school experiences. Rugrats, someone's Facebooking me. I'm just going to take a little peek. I told you about the bonus episode. Got one coming out next month. My top all-time horror anthologies, top 10 horror anthology shows, and top 10 horror anthology movies. But also, I just started a new series where I'm reacting or reviewing, depending on if I've heard it before, different songs. I did 5 of those yesterday. I don't know when they'll be out. Had a fun time doing it. But anyway, forget all that. Forget my rant at the top that just came out of nowhere, sorry. We're going back to November of 1998, so let's go. Back to the podcast. Like I said, we're going back to November of 1998. Let's start off talking about music. As I just did some music reactions and stuff. One of the songs I didn't want to do because of who it was by, but I did it, and it was about as bad as I was expecting. Well, to be fair, not as bad as I was expecting, but anyway, that all leads to I'm going to get to the Hot 100 Billboard charts, which I wasn't listening to during this time, as everybody knows, but I always give it as just a point of reference. Number one for 1 week in the beginning of November, and also 2 back in October for 3 times total, was a song called The First Night by Monica. Never heard of the song. I knew a couple of songs by Monica, like when I started listening to pop, like, I guess, is it the end of this year or the year, or, no, not the end of this year, because we're at November already, but the next year. But I had never heard this song. Doo Wop, That Thing by Lauryn Hill. I think everybody's heard that song from the 90s. It was number 1 for 2 weeks. And then a song called Lately by Divine. Never heard of the song or the group. I'm guessing it's a group, not a band. Maybe it's I don't know. They didn't have too many rock songs on the pop charts unless it was like a massive one towards the end of the 90s. Always seemed to be either rap, R&B, or pop. It didn't seem like many rock artists were getting... Like I said, there was exceptions, obviously, but anyway, we're going to go into my countdown I was listening to, American Country Countdown. Wide Open Spaces by the Dixie Chicks was number 1 for the whole month, which was kind of rare at the time for country. Country charts were more known for like 1 or 2 week runs, maybe 3. But I mean, it shows how big of a song that was. Not their first single, but it was the title track to their first album, and like their first like big hit, and really established them as a force to be reckoned with in country. Of course, all that political stuff and them saying stuff about George Bush overseas and stuff got them. Everybody burning their CDs and stuff. At the time, because it was right after 9/11, I was like, yeah, screw them. They're, anti-American. But looking back on it, it was really just a overreaction by a lot of people. They said that George Bush shouldn't have been, going after, starting wars and stuff. But, at the time, it's like, we just got the freaking attacked on our own soil in multiple places, and thousands and thousands of people died, and we're not supposed to do anything. And that people were upset because she said this over in the UK or something. That part of it I never got. Like, why is that extra upsetting? If they would have said it here, it's not like anything would have been done or something. Sorry, needed a drink. But anyway, it kind of derailed them, and then kind of made them leave country, and their music kind of sucked after that. It was a combination of a little overreacting. The fact, they shouldn't have said that, especially after then, with the way, the way, especially with country music fans are, most country music fans are pro-America, and I don't get into like conservative or liberal, that crap, but I mean, it's just like, I don't know, it was like very bad timing to say something like that, and there was really no point to doing it. All it did was like ruin their career. But anyway, when I look back at stuff like that, I always, I still listen to Dixie Chicks. I never stopped. I think they took the name Dixie out of their name because I guess it has some racist things to. I don't know. There's people outside screaming. I guess I pissed them off by talking about the Dixie Chicks. Sorry, people. It's what, 24 years later, and they're still pissed. Anyway, whenever I look back at stuff like that, I try to, unless they were a horrible person, like a mess with kids or a murderer type thing, I try not to, let politics. Like, I'm about to talk about Garth Brooks. A lot of people don't like him because he supported Biden and all that stuff. And I thought Biden just, not that he was a bad person, but he just wasn't a very good president. But I didn't want to like, oh, Garth Brooks supports him, I'm going to throw his CDs away. But a lot of people, like, I used to like him until politics. And it's not like he's, like, on TV campaigning or anything, He supported a certain... Anyway, it's... That better not... Okay. I'm about to talk about Garth Brooks because he released one of the biggest, and not just because I'm a fan, but one of the biggest albums of all time, Double Live, which is obviously, as you can tell, it's a double CD or tape collection of his live music recorded during his 1996 to 98 world tour, which I would have loved to go on to. I know he came to Cincinnati for a few dates, because when Garth Brooks comes to town, he don't just come one day. It's multiple nights in a row, which is really awesome. Gives it people a chance. But I mean, obviously this time, I told the story before about my abusive stepdad, Marky Foe. My actual dad was has worked security for the Riverfront Coliseum, as it was called at that time. I think it's the Heritage Bank Arena or something in downtown Cincinnati now. But anyway, I guess because of his connections, he was able to get down there when Alabama came to town in the early 90s, and actually got a picture and got it, bought a picture and got it signed by all of them and gave it to me. And within less than a month of having it, Marky Foe ripped it off the wall and threw it away. Like, anyway, how'd I get into that? I was talking about Garth Brooks Double Live. Oh yeah, talking about going to concerts. I was like, how did I even get into that? Because I didn't go to my first concert till like I think 2005, when I won tickets to go see George Strait. Stop, guys! I know going nuts. I should know better to open the door. Trying to let breeze in. Anyway, I'm going to get into the Double Live. I'm going to get into all the tracks on it. I'm not going to spend time explaining every song. That's for my Tales from the Albums videos, if you've seen those. This will definitely be on there. But just kind of get into the songs that were on it. Like I said, it was this CD album, tape, whatever you want to call it, broke all kinds of records. It broke the previous sales record that was held by Pearl Jam for selling over 1 million copies within 1 week. It was like 5 days, I think, it sold over 1 million copies, which was huge then because it was a double album. I don't believe, if I remember correctly, it wasn't double the price, but it was more than a regular album, obviously, because you get, double the album. It eventually would become 23 times platinum, which, if you don't know what that means, platinum is 1 million selling, so it sold over 23 million copies. It's the biggest selling live album of all time, and the 7th most biggest selling album of all genres of all time. I mean, that's massive there if you think of all the albums ever sold. And it was famous for having different covers. There was like a cover where they would show him in Ireland or other concerts. I can't remember how many different covers, but over the years I've had a few of those. Those CD, I've had the longest of them, and I've had multiple of those because if I see them at Goodwill in a different cover, I pick it up just as collector's item. But the one I've had the longest is the one from Ireland, and I know because I remember the CDs had the Ireland flag colors on them. But I originally had this as a tape collection. I bought it from Media Play in Norwood, back when that was still a store there in Surrey Square. Anybody watching this that knows that area, shout out to them. But I remember buying this. You remember the tapes that used to come on the big white plastic things, and they'd be in there, and they'd have to take them out for you. It's probably because of people like me, because I've attempted to steal a tape in the past. Dumb. Don't try that. Trust me. I told about all my stealing wrestling magazines days and stuff. Like, I don't know what I was thinking then. Like, I get annoyed now when I see people like steal a little pack of gum from the self-checkout. like I'm just like, it's like, why do that? But anyway, back to this album. Like I said, I had 2 discs. Start off with Callin' Baton Rouge, one of his favorite songs to start off a concert with. These, like I said, these are from the world tour from like 2 years, so they're not all the same concert or anything. But then we get, what in the heck is going on out there? I swear there's a freaking zombie apocalypse. I heard people going, Rrr. I'm about to go see what the freak that is. Sorry, I'm back. Couldn't see the zombies out there. Probably them freaking neighbors over there that have 9,000 cars and park on other lots like they're not supposed to. Back to this album. Followed up his opening song, Callin' Baton Rouge, with Two of a Kind, Working on a Full House. And then Shameless. What a great song that is, and a great rendition. Like, I'll sometimes be thinking of, remember the live versions of these songs more than the recorded versions, just because I've been listening to this album for almost 2 decades now. Yeah, over 2 decades now. Then we got Papa Love Mama. Great song there, funny song. Then we got the Thunder Rolls with the famed third verse of that, which kind of, I don't know when that verse was written, if it was just written for the live show, but they definitely wouldn't allow that verse on the air because it talks about guns and stuff. We Shall Be Free, which has a unique opening. It's almost like someone playing piano and Garth just kind of singing it by himself, and then we get to the live version, which is pretty cool. Unanswered Prayers is a really cool one because it's an all acoustic one, and I'm almost positive this is the version of the one that was in Ireland. It was also on his From Ireland and Back TV special. But I'm almost positive it's that version, because the crowd sings like the whole song, and and then Garth lets them take over the chorus by themselves, but I mean they're still singing the whole song the whole time. It's really cool. Standing Outside the Fire is a really good one. Long Neck Bottle, the duet with Steve Wariner. Steve Wariner actually joins him on this one. A new one for this collection called It's Your Song. It's a tribute to his mom. Really great song. I'm still looking for the... there was a studio version of this recorded and released as a single. And I talked before about the Wild Horses when he re-recorded that and released it as a CD single. And I finally found it on Amazon. If anybody finds the studio version or knows where I can find of It's Your Song by Garth Brooks, please let me know. I've been dying to have that version. No one cares about you, ESPN. Much Too Young to Feel This Damn Old, one of his greatest classic songs. And then The River, no track number 13. I think he's just, superstitious. I think I heard him talk about that before. Literally, track number 13 is on there, but it's like 6 seconds of crowd noise. They didn't have a song as number actual 13. The 13th song, which is listed as 14, is the final one on it, called Tearing It Up and Burning It Down. again, exclusive to this. He did that one in Ireland, and I actually heard the studio version of that. I have it on. Let's see here. Some annoying kid that keeps messaging me about Andy Shades. Sorry, but you're being annoying about it. I get it. You hate him. Good for you. But why do I gotta find out every 2 seconds? I'm done with him. I done had my match against him. Anyway, Tearing It Up, Burn It Down. Like I said, the studio version he released on his anthology set, which is really cool to have, like the studio version. And then we get into disc 2, Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up. What a way to start off that disc. That freaking song is like nuts. It's like insanity and like a little 3-minute song there. Rodeo is next. Classic song. Beaches of Cheyenne, I love that one. Two Pina Coladas. It has a kind of a island intro where, sound like he's like on the island singing the opening part, and then we get to the live. It's kind of like with the We Shall Be Free. And then we got Wild as the Wind. It's a new song for this. It's a duet with him and Trisha Yearwood. It was originally going to be on a duet album that they were going to do, but that one never came to fruition for whatever reason. This is before they were even together. But great song. No studio version of that that I'm aware of. To Make You Feel My Love, great song. Obviously, Bob Dylan originally wrote that. Garth Brooks definitely does a better version. I'm sorry. That Summer, powerful song like that, especially that live version. American Honky Tonk Bar Association. He has a lot of fun with that one. If Tomorrow Never Comes, that's a great live version of that one. The Fever, which is another one of those nuts songs that just goes by so quick. And then we get Friends in Low Places with the third verse, which he introduced that third verse during his first TV special. This is Garth Brooks. the third verse where it's kind of the same as the second verse, but he changes the last 2 lines. Great fun with that one. The crowd gets to sing along with that verse. And then ends it, as he does with his all his albums, with his favorite song, The Dance, which is his favorite song of all time. But every album he ends with, the song that he feels is the most important or his favorite one. But of course he's going to end this collection with The Dance. This album was actually re-released in 2014 as the 25th anniversary edition. Although it technically wasn't the 25th anniversary of the album. It was just his 25th anniversary of recording music. He started in '89. But the songs on the special edition included More Than a Memory, which is one of probably his last, I think it was his last #1, or at least his last biggest song up until that point. Working for a Living, the duet he did with Huey Lewis. That was originally a Huey Lewis song. A Heart in New York, which is, I think, Simon and Garfunkel. If I'm wrong on that, let me know. I don't know much about them. Sorry. But it was the intro for Rodeo when he opened up the Central Park show. So you get that and the Rodeo from that. So I guess Rodeo came from that one, because it's the same Rodeo as on the regular Double Live. That Heart in New York intro with, you can hear the helicopter in the background. And 2 other songs on this were later songs of his, Good Ride Cowboy and Wrapped Up in You. So yeah, Double Live, you can tell I love that one so much. But speaking of remembering things, I'm going to talk a little bit about, this was November of '98, so it wouldn't be too long before we left Marky Foe. He's just such a great person, breaking a little kid's signed poster from his dad. Anyway, trying to get hung up on that, but wouldn't be too much longer. We're moving away and moving in with my granny, and so it's nice to go back and look at just some of our friends in Norwood. We had some great friends. Our next door neighbors were probably our closest friends, because we weren't hardly ever allowed out anyway. And if it was just around them, because Marky Foe was friends with their dad. His name was Brigham, but we called him Big Man for some reason. I don't know if we couldn't just pronounce his name. I remember the one time we had our weenie dog Larry, first of many weenie dogs in my life. But little Larry Lee, I love that dog. But he ran outside, and I went to run after him because Big Man was coming home. And he was running out into his driveway, and I like just got him in time, but then he ran over my foot with the van. And I was just remarkable at the time is the fact that it didn't hurt at all. Like I just had my foot ran over by a vehicle, a big van, and it didn't hurt at all. Like, I guess because it just went right over it. I don't know. Maybe my foot happened to be in the right place. But I don't know. I've just always remembered that memory for some reason. Like I got my foot ran over. It didn't even hurt. But yeah, his daughters were our friends. Let's see if I can remember their names now. Bridget, Brittany. I believe there was a third one, and then there was their cousin Vesta. And we would always play hide and seek with them, and I've told this before, but I'm gonna tell it again. I was like obsessed with trampolines, cause I freaking loved them. Wasn't ever able to have one. I think our mom got us one. Yeah, later on, when I was like 16 or 17. But we had it for less than like 2 weeks, and where we lived in, the landlord said we had to get rid of it. But yeah, I just loved trampolines. They were so much fun to jump on. We were hardly ever allowed on there because big man said we couldn't. You have 3 kids, and all the kids in the neighborhood that would want to come over and play on it. And he knew us. It's not like we're gonna do anything to it, but he wouldn't let us on it. But anyway, during hide and seek, everybody be running around. I would dart straight into their backyard and start jumping on the trampoline until I heard people coming, and they'd get off the trampoline and hide. I got caught many times doing that. Like, get out of my yard! I was back the next day. But, yeah, we had this friend named Dale. He was a friend until he stole Josh's bike at one point. Yeah, Josh had this orange bike. It was like one of those BMX trick bikes with the pegs on the back. I always loved the mountain bikes, but Josh loved those type of bikes. Him and Travis were more into that and skateboarding. Like, him and Travis were learning tricks on the skateboard. I was just like standing on it and using it as a means of travel, or sitting on it trying to go down a hill. We didn't have many hills where we lived, like right in front of our house, to do that. Unlike later on when we lived down Alvina and I had a skateboard and Travis rode it down the hill and wiped out and pooped himself. Sorry, I gotta tell the story, Travis. We called him skid marks because he was wiping his butt with a leaf. Although, to be fair, if I'm gonna tell that story, making fun of him, I'm the idiot that, I don't know when it was, early 90's, my first time going to VV, Indiana, which I would eventually live there multiple times. Been a lot of time out there, actually. But I went there to go camping with my dad and his ex-wife and her husband, which they were friends, It seems kind of strange, I think, that, 2 guys that were married to the same person could be friends, but they were actually friends, People can't make those kind of things work. It depends on the ex-husband. If the ex-husband is like an abusive piece of crap and, no one wants him around, but that wasn't my dad at all. So, they were friends. But anyway, with their kids that they had together, I went camping with them, like I said, early 90's. I had to go poop in the woods, and you got anything to wipe your butt with? You just got to use a leaf. Well, I figure any leaf was safe. No, not my dumbass. I have to grab a poison ivy leaf. So I end up with poison ivy all over, and I mean all over. You could just imagine. Yeah, so if I'm going to tell a story about Travis wiping his butt with a leaf, at least it was a leaf, not itchiness for days. And I want to mention here that I'm also allergic to poison ivy. So it was bad. But yeah, like I said, Josh's bike got stolen by Dale, who was our friend at the time. But then funny how he never came around after that, after the bike went missing. Someone told us they seen him and one of his other friends take off with it. And we didn't even get a chance to confront him because he never came around. And I don't remember where he lived. It was, further than we were allowed to go. Sometimes we were allowed to go to Hunter Park there, which was right by UDF. That was our area. We were allowed to go to the park there sometimes when Marky Phil was feeling generous and just he was being such a great dad. He was like Like, I'm going to be nice today and let you go to the park. Like, oh, thank you for letting us be children. Anyway, that UDF, I went there many mornings to get cherry sweet rolls, if you remember those, since they're not around anymore. The cinnamon rolls are still around, but the cherry sweet rolls were always the best by Hostess. Go there and get that for us for breakfast if they had them. Sometimes it'd just be Little Debbie snack cakes if they didn't have any of the sweet rolls or donuts. I get Marky Fo a newspaper. And I just like little things like walking to the store to entertain myself. I'd always like read the quarters and see what was on them. Or if I had dollar bills, I'd like arrange them by year and serial number. I drive my wife nuts. I'll still try to do that today. It's like, you don't need to rearrange the stuff. Yes, I do. Anyway, sorry I've been talking about 30 minutes. I haven't got very far in the podcast. But I'm just having fun talking about some of this stuff. It's fun to reminisce. I'm sure you guys have like your own memories of all kinds of stuff as kids. Maybe this will inspire anybody watching to make their own videos. You don't have to do like everything. Like, I'm on episode number 47 now. You don't have to come up with your own whatever you want to do. Whether you want to go back through time periods or just talk about your own life. It's pretty fun to do. And you never know when people get a kick out of listening to your weird stories. But yeah, that was just some of the fun times. Like I said, it was our last days in Norwood, so we're getting towards the end of living there and moving on to the next phase of life. But a few movies that came out that month. The first one is an all-time classic, The Waterboy. Everybody knows that movie. They just came out with the sequel to Happy Gilmore, which I really liked. It wouldn't surprise me if they come out with a sequel to The Waterboy. Him grown up and maybe his kids like kind of like he was and playing football, or maybe like a reversal, like maybe his kid turns out to be like quote unquote normal, but is like a jerk and a bully to like the local water boy. His dad finds out, and who knows what they could do with that. But The Water Boy is just one of those, when Adam Sandler really started becoming big. Just a hilarious movie. Of course, being me, I remember the KFC looking guy, the professor. My mama says. Kathy Bates is so good too, by the way. It's funny. She could play a serious role and win an Oscar for being like this completely believable psycho in Misery, and then go into being this like idiot, like football's the devil, foosball is the devil. In this, like, she's such a great actress. Another movie that came out was I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which of course is the big sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer. Which is always, they're always looped together with the Scream movies. They're not the same type of things, but it was around the same time that Scream and then later I Know What You Did Last Summer came out, and they were both big hits because, Scream kind of brought back horror. Horror had kind of fallen off as far as like, box office. I mean, there were still horror fans, but I'm talking about like mainstream going to see movies type thing. Scream really brought that back, and I Know What You Did Last Summer was another huge hit. The sequel was good. It wasn't as good as the first one. There was a TV series recently, the last few years, and I watched it just to watch it, but it was basically freaking softcore porn, like you see on Cinemax type stuff. More interested in relationships, and I still can't remember like who did what or why even. Twin sisters, and half through the thing I couldn't even tell which one been the one that lived and which one died. That series sucked. I wasn't sad that they didn't bring that back. I can't remember if they had 1 or 2 seasons, but I know at some point it was over and I was glad. But speaking of that type of thing, Jerry Springer Ringmaster came out at this time. Of course, this was the height of Jerry Springer popularity. Like, he was all over the place. That was your go-to if you stayed home from school sick or during the summer. I was just watching what craziness. I mean, it's crazy to think that he started out as a news anchor for my hometown, Cincinnati, Channel 5. Then became mayor. Literally got caught paying for a prostitute with a personal check. I mean, come on, Jerry. But then he went on to Chicago to do this little, talk show, and I've seen a documentary on it. His producer's like not the greatest person in the world. Really pushed all this other stuff, and like I enjoyed watching it, but you could tell Jerry Springer was like embarrassed at some of the topics they had, and some of the stuff he had to do. But he was still really funny, and but like I said, the height of his popularity, he came out with a movie which is basically playing himself almost on a talk show with like this family that went on there, and it's just as we put it back when we were kids, when we would sneak and watch thing, whenever there'd be a naked scene or something, we would say, "I can see parts." It's like parts. Only like 2 or 3 people will get that, and why I'm laughing so hilariously at that. But yeah, I seen parts. You can guess what parts we seen. But anyway, while we're back in the memories, my brother Travis gave me an idea the other day of what to talk about, and I was thinking about doing my own episode on it, but I've kind of touched on these things before. Way back when I, like, my second ever bonus episode, I think it was like November of last year. It was the one I did outside with my wife, which the audio quality, half of it sucked because I didn't take the fact that the freaking wind would be blowing. But it's still a fun podcast to do, where we just talk about our favorite toys from childhood. And this is kind of like that, but it's just kind of given like a Cliff Notes version, just of the very top of the memory of what I can think of when I think of childhood toys I played with. Not going to give all of them again, because like I said, I've done that before. But the one he was talking about with me on the phone was the Flipping Head Power Rangers, which was a set up the original Power Rangers, and you'd have the Ranger, but you could actually flip the head over into the actual the actual person behind the Power Ranger. Like the one I had was the Green Ranger, and you could the Green Ranger, and you could flip his head over and it'd be Tommy. But it was a really cool toy. They had such great Power Ranger toys when we were kids. I remember I got the Red Thunder Megazord whenever they went to the second set of Zords, the Thunder Zords, the Red Dragon that Jason had as the Red Ranger. Being like the dragon form, and then you could actually make it into the Power Ranger form, as you can see here. I didn't have this giant thing when I was a kid, which I would have loved. But yeah, they had such great Power Ranger toys. Of course, wrestling toys. We always had those everywhere. A lot, just the classic figures. Around this time, they had the Jakks Pacific WWF figures out, which were like really good, super lifelike for the time. And of course, the classic like LJN, I think they were rubber figures from like the early 90s and the late 80s for WWF. And of course we had the Brawlin' Buddies. I had a Hogan one. I think my brother had a Warrior one. Or it was either Ultimate Warrior or Macho Man. I can't remember which. The ones that talk. Stop! Those were fun. They had the wrestling rings. We never had like an elaborate one. We had a ring, and then we'd like set up our own little intros and going to the. I always had I don't know, a lot of people did their own matches. Mine was like different. I would have a system, and it wouldn't just be wrestling figures. It'd be other action figures. Any action figure I have that was a human body, basically. I would have a system of how to have a match with them. I would take them, pull them apart like this, and then slam them together. However many times. But if they landed face up, that was like a win for them. Face down was like a loss. So, and it was always 2 out of 3. So it would go on until there was a winner. That was a winner. That's how my action figures won. And they'd have to land in the ring. A lot of people were doing like the stuff off the ropes and come up with like you've seen on YouTube whatever they call those things, where they have like come up with actual like videos of like they're doing the matches. Not me. I'm just slamming them together stupidly. But speaking of wrestling, one of the most unique things I had as a kid. I remember getting it for my, I believe it was my 9th or 10th birthday. I can't remember. No, it wasn't 10th. No, it was my 8th birthday. We live in Mount Carmel. I got a Hulk Hogan camera, where it was like huge technology for the time, but it was this yellow camera. When you took, obviously back in the days when you put film in a camera, digital cameras weren't a thing yet, or if they were, they weren't widely available. But I was talking about the Hulk Hogan camera. It was a really cool camera that when you took a picture, it like, because there was like a picture of Hulk Hogan on the front, it would like superimpose him, so like every stupid gnat. That's what happens when I get the door open. But every picture you take, it would look like you're like Hulk Hogan's posing with whoever's in the picture. Like I said, very, very high technology for the time. But no, those were pretty cool. Do you guys remember those castles? I always see people post the ones with the gray castle, and it's the ones with like the moat, like the little that has the drawbridge that goes down over that, and then there's like the thing at the top. It's got like the thing that goes like this. If you put something on it, and you can like throw somebody down into the dungeon, and then at the bottom there's a gate you can let them out. And they had those little knights figures. Like there's like 2 different colors of the knights, and they all had different weapons in their hands. Little hard rubber. You could move them a little bit, but mainly just like they're already in whatever pose they're in. But you guys remember those? And like the different levels of the castle, and it would like open up. Everybody like always posts a picture of the gray castle. I remember that too, because we had one of those. But I remember a golden one that was had little different features on it, but kind of the same. If you guys remember what I'm talking about or find it on there, I think there's pictures online of it. But it's like a golden color. That was the first one I had, and those were like even better quality. I remember those. Didn't have any knight figures with those, so it was always like little mini like action figures that would fit down into the thing, because it's kind of a small opening for it. But those are like, everybody seemed to have one of those. I remember my brother Josh got, even though he got it, we all used it. One year he got a toy box, back when toy boxes were a thing, it seemed like, and they were like creative. But this was like a giant football that had like a lid on it, and you could put toys in it. It was like a gigantic football toy box. It was really cool. Just some of the board games they'd come out with. Of course, there was all the different things where you could make monsters and stuff, and of course everybody knows Play-Doh and all the creations there. But one of my favorite board games was called Gooey Louie. One of those in a line of like disgusting games, where like this one was literally, you would pull these like rubber like slime, they weren't slimy, but they're meant to look like they're slimy, rubber boogers out of the nose, and it was basically just like a game of chance where you I can't remember if you rolled a dice or spun a thing, or if it just take turns where you'd pull the boogers out, and whoever made his brain pop out of his head lost. Like, you'd just pull the right one, or I guess the wrong one, and his brain would pop out the top. Real great message they're sending kids back in our day. But of course, then there's the 9,000 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figures. Favorite thing of all time I ever had was the Turtle Van. I wanted the Technodrome so bad. Couldn't ever get that because that was like expensive, but I always wanted that. But I always had all kinds of Turtles figures. If you see floating across the screen here in a minute, I just got a little keychain of Leonardo, which is a newer version, not exactly the best. There's a generic Power Ranger. And then there's, for some reason, a rubber chicken that squeaks. Sometimes. He ain't squeaking. There he goes. Drive my dogs nuts. That's my little keychains there. I don't have an action figure collection like I used to. I wish I did. Another really cool thing I had back when like building forts and having little tents to like play with in the house were a cool thing at the time, was this tent that we had. It was like, it popped up and it had these like plastic pieces you put into place to make it have its form, but it was in the shape of like an army jeep, which was like a really cool thing. And it was like big enough for like 2 or 3 kids to sit in comfortably, while still being like in a room. So it was like, you could use it as a tent. We never went camping with it. We never went camping anywhere. But you could use it as, as just to play with in the room, which is what we did. And we pretend we're in the army and stuff. We come up with all kind of weird things, like Star Trek, The Next Generation was like a big show at the time. So, as my brother Josh called him, John Fruit Loop Picard, because he couldn't say his name. But we would pretend we had bunk beds, pretend we were on Star Wars. We had our old Nintendo, which by that point it wasn't working anymore. And it was like our command station or something. And pretend our bunk beds were freaking a spaceship, and we'd build, put like sheets down over it. Just the dumb stuff you do as kids. And of course, there's simple stuff that, you didn't even need that much money for. Like, everybody remember the games and stuff they used to have just on cereal boxes? My favorite were the little board games you'd play with, like pennies or nickels or, coins you find, or just anything really. Where you'd have a dice. It always seems like everybody had dice laying around for some board game or something. But yeah, and you would go ahead a certain amount, and it would say like go back 2 spaces, or that, and you get to the end, just little simple games like that on the back, That was back when they had, really good cereal boxes. They would have that, or they'd have like tons of stuff you can read on the cereal boxes. It's not like, nowadays you can just scroll through your phone, to entertain yourself. Going to the bathroom is definitely different. Like, I don't know how many times I read my mom's tampon box while going to the bathroom. Not because I was like particularly interested in tampons. It's just like, it's something to do while I'm going to the bathroom. Go from talking about toys to tampons. Only on my podcast. But the last thing, speaking of my mom, I don't want to segue from that, but it kind of fits. One of the greatest toys or games or whatever you want to call it I ever had came from something my mom came up with, and I don't know if it's something that her parents had done for her or something, but she obviously had been known how to do it for years, and it's like I said, it's completely simple. We'd always see on TV those parking garages and other Hot Wheels tracks and stuff. Like the most famous was always like the parking garage with like the working car wash that would be on it, or stuff like that. But we could never afford those. But we had plenty of Hot Wheels and Micro Machines and off-brand toy cars. So my mom would take a simple paper grocery bag, which is more likely to find in stores then was the paper bags and plastic back then. Makes you really appreciate the plastic now, because the paper bags would rip. Although back then they were better quality than they are now. It's just like toilet paper quality they use today, because nobody hardly ever uses paper bags. But anyway, she would draw out this city on a paper bag, and I remember there's probably other kids that would have seen this and would have laughed and said, "Oh, you're poor," but this was like the greatest thing in the world to me at the time. She would draw streets, and there would be stores, local stores that we knew what they are, and there would be like a park, and just different ways to go on the streets, and just fun things to just a little paper bag that you just drive your cars around, and you just come up with stories either out loud or in your head of what you're doing. It was stuff like that'll always be with me. Get creative with your kids these days. I know it's hard to get kids to do anything that doesn't involve video games or iPads and phones and stuff. Back then we had to be creative. Nowadays you don't have to be, but I encourage any parents out there that have kids now, do something like that. If not that exact thing, come up with different little games and stuff for kids to play, because take time with your kids to come up with creative stuff. Give them memories that they'll remember, other than oh, I remember playing this game a lot on the phone. I'm glad that I grew up in the time period I did. I mean, it would have been nice as a kid, obviously, to have all this technology. But I'm glad I grew up during a time period where I remember my mom making a city to play with my Hot Wheels on a paper bag, and doing games on the back of cereal boxes. I'm glad I grew up during that, because it really gives you an appreciation of what technology is like now. But I'll get off my memory soapbox there. Get back to the podcast, and we're going to talk about wrestling now. Of course, being 98, wrestling was huge. I might have to check this list out in a little bit. Like I said, wrestling was huge at this time. ECW had just gotten on pay-per-view the year before. They're here with their November to Remember from November 1st. And apparently it was their 6th November to Remember from New Orleans. Apparently it was not a November to Remember, because I know critics seemed to pan this event, and it was too many tag team matches and just more of the typical ECW type stuff you'd see at the time, which, sometimes it was good, but sometimes it's just so much chaos, and a match would lead into this match and lead into this match and not seem like anything was actually booked for the show, even though obviously it probably was. It just didn't seem like, we watch WWF, WCW, these are the matches that are going to happen, they're already placed in this order, which, ECW I get was counterculture and everything like that, but it just seems like sometimes they were just doing way too much when, sometimes they should have done just, try to make it more like a wrestling show every once in a while. But on this show, Masato Tanaka and Balls Mahoney defeated ECW World Tag Team Champions, the Dudley Boys, for the titles. Dudley Boys would win them back like 5 days later on an episode of Hardcore TV. The main event was the new triple threat, Taz, Sabu, and RVD. I remember them teaming up. That was like a huge thing at the time, because, Taz and Sabu hated each other forever. They defeated the, I don't know if it's regular or old triple threat of Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Chris Candido. I mean, if Sabu, RVD, and Taz are the new triple threat, what does that make them? The old or the regular? But big event for WWF. They had the Survivor Series, November 15th from St. Louis, Missouri. It's the 12th Survivor Series. Also referred to as the Deadly Game, Survivor Series Deadly Game, because there's the Deadly Game tournament, which was to crown a new WWF champion. Undertaker and Kane had screwed Stone Cold out of the title, and they were supposed to face each other, and then Stone Cold was supposed to be the referee and didn't count either one. It was just, the title was held up and put in this tournament. Well, all this time, Vince had Mankind, of course, Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, all those, team up to, grooming him basically to be his corporate champion. And, Mankind, the fans loved him, but, it was like a case of Vince, like, using him. You could tell he wasn't a bad guy, but, Vince was making him do stuff. And, Vince like, oh, you're going to win the title at the pay-per-view. Which, obviously, don't turn out to be that way. They recreate, basically, the Montreal Screwjob of the year before of that Survivor Series, with the famous story where Bret Hart was leaving, wouldn't drop the title to Shawn Michaels, so Vince screwed him out of it, and Bret's still whining. God, he does nothing but whine online. But anyway, back 98, we didn't have online like now. Thank God, because actually I remember Bret whining at this time on his little column he had or something on some Canadian website. Anyway, they ended up doing that where The Rock would end up winning. Vince would have him ring the bell, and they basically screwed Mankind. The Rock became the new corporate champion, and that was really the start of the group known as the Corporation. With Vince leading it with the Stooges, and there'd been a loose affiliation there, but it was like officially became a group. The Rock, Ken Shamrock, Big Boss Man, all those. This is before the DX would get involved, and the corporate ministry and everything watered it down. But this is kind of the start of that. The show was mostly tournament matches. They had no tradition. It was the first one ever Survivor Series to not have any traditional Survivor Series matches. Which, of course, if you know what those are, they're traditionally 5-on-5, and sometimes it'd be 4-on-4, where you'd have teams and you'd have eliminations until there would be one team left, whether it'd just be one person on the team or however many people are still left, and that would be the winners of the team. I can't remember whether they awarded the wins for those to the whole team even after some members have been eliminated, or if it's just the people that were still in there. I don't know how they did that. Not like it matters. It's not like sports records or anything, but like I said, it was mostly tournament matches. Trying to see if there's anything else from there missing. Like Sable defeated Jacqueline to win the WWF women's title. Let's see. Yeah, and the events of this would lead into, you know, big WrestleMania 15 the next year. Of course, Mankind at the end of the year, and you know, the next month, which would be aired on a tape delay, January 4th, I think it was. Famously would win the WWF title for Mankind on Raw, and were on Nitro. They were live and they were making fun of Raw for being taped, and like, Mankind, who wrestled here, as Tony Schiavone was told to say on commentary by Bischoff on WCW Nitro, Mankind, who wrestled here previously as Cactus Jack, won their world title. That'll put butts in the seats. The famous line, and like literally at that moment, everybody changed the channel to see him win because, you know, it was a big deal. And they screwed themselves royally out of viewers, and that was really where the Nitro or Raw started taking over, and it wasn't, you know, there's many reasons why WCW died, but that was one of the earliest and like the biggest reasons right there. Of course, what WCW ended up doing didn't help themselves either, as I'm about to talk about. But like I said, he wins that, and they end up having that terrible like I Quit match at the Royal Rumble. I say terrible because of the freaking chair shots The Rock gave Mankind unprotected, like completely over the line there. And then they would have halftime heat at during the Super Bowl, where they would have the empty arena match between The Rock and Mankind. Anyway, The Rock would eventually get the title back, and then go on, and Stone Cold would win the Royal Rumble, and they'd face off, and Stone Cold, you know, get the big win at WrestleMania. Just like a culmination of all that. You know, really fun, memorable time in wrestling. You can see I could just remember this off the top of my head without looking up those facts, because I just, you know, it plays in my head. But this month has also seen WCW, NWO, as they were branding the stuff with NWO at the time too. World War III, November 22nd, from Auburn Hills, Michigan. This is the fourth and final World War III pay-per-view. A lot of stuff happened on this one. It was like a lackluster event, and people were like, you know, not very happy because their champion, world champion Bill Goldberg, had just won the title back in July. You know, that huge, like one of the biggest Nitro moments ever, him beating Hogan, and he was like on some segment with the Steiner brothers, wasn't even in a match. I mean, I get when Hogan did that because he had creative control and only had a certain amount of dates a year that he had to do, so he wasn't always defending his title on the pay-per-views. But I mean, there was no reason for Goldberg to not. But anyway, Billy Kidman defeated WCW Cruiserweight Champion Juventud Guerrera for the title, and Guerrera just beaten him for the title on the Go Home edition of Nitro, which, if you don't know what that means, it's the last televised event before the pay-per-view, just in case you didn't know what that means. WCW World TV Champion Chris Jericho with Ralphus. Get me into Ralphus, his security guard. Ralphus goes as a story that goes back with me. I'm sorry, it's going to be a long podcast. You better settle in. We had a New Year's Eve party. It may have been this year even. Where just like all these people that he knew from the bar and all his drunk friends would come over, Marky Foe, that is. And, you know, I think me and my brothers and my friend Nick spent the night. We were like in the basement, you know, hanging out, listening to music and stuff. We'd go up and get food and stuff. But there was this drunk guy that nobody knows where he came from. It's like a homeless guy. He just wandered in off the street. And his name was Ralph. And he almost looked like Ralphus, but not exactly. But we started calling, ever since we called him Ralphus. But there's these things that my mom liked, I think. Or maybe Marky Foe liked. I don't know. Someone liked them. But you ever heard of pickled herring, the pickled fish? Well, we call them pickled Harrys. Anyway, he ate this whole thing. Like, literally ate the whole jar of them. Was farting all night. and passed out drunk. I think he like crapped himself and like just got up and left, and there was like a trail of poop. My mom had to clean. Like, it was bad. Anyway, this guy forever, as Ralphus, is entwined with this homeless guy. I'm sorry, but besides that, the Ralphus character on wrestling was hilarious. Just like this snaggletooth guy. There's like on their. I think he was like a truck driver for WCW. Jericho just decides to use him, and later on he would go to have matches and stuff. It's insane. But anyway, WCW. Jericho was the World Television Champion. He retained his title. He defeated Bobby Duncombe Jr. He'd lose the title to Conan a week later on Nitro. But Kevin Nash won the World War III match, which, if you don't know what that is, has 3 rings. So I know that's already a lot there and hard to shoot. It's hard when they do the Fall Brawl War Games when they have 2 rings back in WCW. It's hard to shoot it and make sense on the screen. But yeah, this was 3 rings, and it was a battle royal, 20 wrestlers in each ring, and they would get down to where they would there'll be just a few left, and they all go into 1 ring. But anyway, the winner of it got a world title shot at Starrcade, and Kevin Nash won this by defeating Lex Luger, which is start off a chain of events on its own. Like I was talking about The Rock and Mankind. Nash would go on to defeat Goldberg and break Goldberg's streak the next month by Scott Hall using the stun gun on him. Fans hated that. And then on that very same night that Mankind won, like I said, it was on tape delay, but it was aired on January 4th. They had the incident known as the Finger Poke of Doom, where Hogan and Nash had been feuding, and Goldberg was supposed to get his title shot back, but Hogan showed up, and Hogan was the good guy in this situation, and challenged Nash to win the title back. And they get in the ring, and they're about to go at it because they'd been feuding, over control like the NWO and stuff. But Hogan goes like that to his chest. Nash takes this exaggerated bump, and Hogan pins him for 3, and they all celebrate like, you ruined Goldberg's streak with the screwy finish, but it is what it is. If that would have been on its own, that would have been fine. But all this to set up Hogan getting the title back. It was just like WrestleMania 9 all over again, where Bret Hart loses the title to Yokozuna, and then Hogan wins it like a minute and a half later. All Hogan and his creative control, and that was another, that whole night, January 4th of 1999, will be remembered forever as when they started getting the casket together for WCW. But yeah, it all started at this one. Actually, it started the month before at Halloween Havoc, when the horrible Hogan Ultimate Warrior match that went so long and was so screwed up that they couldn't even show the finish of the Goldberg DDP match. That was really where WCW's the wheels started to fall off. But that wasn't even the main event of the show, the World War III match. It was WCW US Champion DDP defeated Bret Hart to keep his title, and then I think a week later on Nitro, Bret Hart ended up winning it from him. But yeah, that was like when it started going crazy. Other title change that happened, Gillberg, which was WWF's version of Goldberg, Dwayne Gill, like a light heavyweight. They shaved his head, and he started going, I just did a Hacksaw Jim Duggan impersonation, but that was kind of him. But his name was, they called him Gillberg, and he would come out with this, Goldberg would have this, the pyro behind him. He would come out with someone holding sparklers, and have the light heavyweight. He won the light heavyweight title by defeating Christian on Raw, November 23rd. Back before the Survivor Series, when Vince was still trying, was making Mankind believe that he was, going to make him the next champion, he gave Mankind his the first ever hardcore title, which was basically a broken up title. If I remember correctly, I think it was during a feud with Hogan and Mr. Perfect. I think it was Hogan. Can't remember exactly for sure. But anyway, I think it was I remember the Genius being involved, Lanny Poffo. But they broke the WWF title, the Winged Eagle one from the 90's. And I believe this was that title, and it had duct tape on it and said hardcore, and that would eventually be the hardcore title. This was the very start of it. Vince awarded it to Mankind, and then he lost it on Raw after the Survivor Series in a ladder match to Big Boss Man. But this is before the 24/7 rule where you could defend it anywhere. It was, they were treating it like a legit, like a joke, which would become. But yeah, that's a lot going on in wrestling. A lot going on in TV too. Barney and Friends had its 100th episode. Of course, couldn't escape that. I told the story in my back to school bonus episode how my principal dressed up as Barney and we all threw rocks at him and got in major trouble. So we didn't know it was our principal. But yeah, Barney was like all over pop culture. Like, my brothers would watch it in the morning, so I would be watching it. And it just like something you couldn't get away from. The Barney dolls, and people had the Barney shoes, and the freaking theme song. Wasn't even the main theme song. It was the I Love You at the end that people remembered just as much, if not better, than the Barney is a dinosaur, the opening song. But they had it their 100th episode. The Barney of today is nothing like then. Oh my God, I seen the new Barney merchandise at Walmart, and I was like, what the hell is this? This looks like you ordered it off of Wish. But there were some TV shows that were ending at the time. Animaniacs. They had been on for 5 seasons on Fox, and then the WB. They ended up getting canceled because WB ended up laying off a bunch of writers and stuff. It's kind of a crappy end. They ended it with a movie. It was called Animaniacs Wacko's Wish. I've never seen that one, but I need to. It was brought back in 2020 for a couple seasons on Hulu, but I haven't watched it yet to know whether it's good or not. Pinky and the Brain, which is, of course, a spinoff of Animaniacs. There were characters on there. They ended at the same time, too. They had 4 seasons on WB. Their last season was really crappy. It was Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain. The writers and everybody in creative didn't want to do it, but the WB pressured them to add more characters to it, and they didn't want to cross people. Pinky and the Brain, even though they came from Animaniacs, they wanted it to be its own universe, but then they were bringing in Elmira from, but it was just like a whole bunch of stuff, and because of the writers getting laid off, they ended that too. But another show that ended that was very popular was Goosebumps. They had 4 seasons on Fox. Of course, there's been a recent reboot. I haven't seen any of those yet, but some of the most classic things ever on the most classic book series ever. I still remember the first ever Goosebumps TV show in '95 when it aired. The Haunted Mask that was on Friday night. It was such a big deal, and because kids have been going nuts over the Goosebumps books anyway, and now they're coming out with the TV series, and it was just so good. Like I said, it ended its run this year, and Power Rangers in Space had their last episode, and it was really a turning point in the Power Ranger franchise. It really kind of tied up everything and ended the original, from the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and they'd get the Thunder Zords, and then all that through the movie, and then the Turbo Rangers, the Ninja Rangers. It kind of all culminated. You didn't have the original Rangers, but in space, but it was still building off of that, and they had to find Zordon. I think Andros was the leader, like in the Tommy role, or the Jason before him. He was the Red Ranger in space, but they were trying to save Zordon. But at the end, Zordon realized that if they break his power tube and he dies, basically, didn't say dies, but it was implied that it would save the world, the whole universe actually. And of course, Andros didn't want to destroy Zordon, but eventually realized he had to, and then he, destroyed his power tube or whatever you call it, and this energy wave turned all the monsters to dust. And it was like a two-part episode, I think. It was 2 parts, called Countdown to Destruction, and it turned Rita and Lord Zed and Divatox back into humans, and they were good. I'd never actually seen this episode. I'd just seen that part of it, and I was I want to go back and watch it, because I kind of stopped watching at the beginning of the In Space. I was like, oh great, In Space, here we go with this trope of a TV show or movie whenever it hits in space, like Leprechaun in space. And even Jason X wasn't the best of movies when he went to space, but the whole, when they're going into space, it's well, this one's done. But I wish I would have watched the series. Had some crazy stuff on there. They had the Ninja Turtles on there at one point. the Next Mutation version, you know, the one that isn't really liked well, and the female turtle, Venus de Milo. But still, it had the Turtles and the Power Rangers together, which is really cool. I've seen those episodes. But yeah, it's just, like I said, it's the end of an era. The next one started off, it wasn't, you know, the same people, wasn't the same, like, anything, you know. It just went down the crapper from there, really. And another thing that debuted, one thing that debuted this time, not another thing, but was the biography channel. If everybody remembers, you know, A&E biographies were like super popular at the time. They're a really well done show. This is the time they were expanding the cable TV because of digital cable coming into existence. You know, they had more room on the, you know, on the cable system for more channels. So the A&E came out with the biography channel. It would later get shortened to Bio, and then I think now it's called the FYI network. I know at the time it was like millions and millions of homes biography channel was. The FYI network is like only like 77,000 homes or something, like barely on any cable systems, you know. Because nowadays, you know, we're going from cable channels with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of channels as a package to going to streaming, so there's not like a need for all those channels, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, who cares what this channel is? I'm just going to watch streaming or just watch free stuff like Tubi or Pluto TV even. You know, cable is really going out of the way, but you know, you'd think, oh, people are saving money. Well, yeah, you can, but if you want like to be able to watch every show that's on, it seems like you've got to pay even more for streaming than cable. So it seems like they've, you know, cable TV is like, well, I'm going to screw these people, and streaming's like, hold my beer. But anyway, that's a little bit about TV. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about sports. Being November, of course, baseball's over. The NFL just finished the 13th week of this season. Leaders at the time for the AFC were the Dolphins, Jets, Jaguars, and Broncos. The Broncos were undefeated 12-0. They would end up going on winning one more game to be 13-0. A lot of people thought they were going to, you know, be undefeated the whole year. They ended up not being, but still pretty good season for them, as you'll see. The Bengals were last at the time with 2-10. The NFC leaders were Cowboys, Vikings, and Falcons. And then, like I said, the Broncos ended up going on to beat the Falcons for their second Super Bowl in a row. And John Elway would retire, of course, after that year. Famously went out on top. But yeah, those late 90s Broncos teams were, you know, right up there with, they don't get talked about as much as maybe the Bills and the 49ers, and especially the 49ers and the Cowboys from the 90s. But you know, those teams, especially, you know, Terrell Davis and John Elway, I mean, those teams were big. Some NASCAR news, of course, November being the last month of the season. Jeff Gordon won the final two races of the year. He won the AC Delco 400 at Rockingham and the Napa 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I can't talk. You know, my motor mouth. Anyway, that pretty much secured his third championship that year for NASCAR championship. I believe he's won, I don't know, is it 4 or 5? But definitely, as you can see, my favorite driver of all time. Video games. There was a video game system that was released in November. Well, technically the Sega Dreamcast was released then too, but in Japan, so I'm not really going to talk about that until, you know, I believe I've covered November 99 already when I talked about the Dreamcast. If I haven't, I'll definitely cover it again. But Nintendo Game Boy Color was released at this time. And it was a pretty big system. It was one of the biggest things that people said about it that they liked was the fact that it had backwards compatibility, where you could play, you know, the original Game Boy games in it. It didn't have a very long life though. It only had 3 years because essentially it was, you know, basically the same graphics, just a colorized version of it. You know, no backlight, or if it did, it wasn't a very good one. And so it really didn't advance it. It was kind of like, you know, a stopgap in between, kind of like what Sega Saturn ended up being between the Sega Genesis and all its 32X and add-ons and the CD. and the Dreamcast, kind of like Sega Saturn was kind of, Game Boy was kind of, it only lasted 3 years, and in 2001 the Game Boy Advance came out. One of my favorite handheld systems of all time. I love that thing. But yeah, it was, like I said, pretty much the something outside. I thought it was something spraying in here. I'm gonna get up and check on that. So I'm getting up more times in this podcast than I can think. Actually, it's not even spraying, it's somebody sawing outside. Anyway, there seems to be a lot of people doing that in yard work outside when it just rained all day yesterday. Good luck getting the grass unclogged out of your freaking lawnmowers. But anyway, like I said, the Game Boy, like I said, it had color, and it was, they praised the backwards compatibility, but like I said, it really didn't last that long. Game Boy Advance came out and was like a completely different system, really good. My favorite Game Boy version of all time. Books wise, the original Goosebumps series had already ended, but they were still coming out with the Give Yourself Goosebumps, which I've been reading through that series one by one. It's like the Choose Your Own Adventure but Goosebumps version. But they were on number 31 at this time, so it'll be a while before I get there. I think I'm on either the third or fourth book, and it just came in the library, so I gotta go pick that up. But this one's called The Werewolf of Twisted Tree Lodge. And then, like I said, the Goosebumps series, the original series had ended. Like I said earlier, the TV series, but the book series had ended. But they had Goosebumps 2000, which was just their way of rebooting the Goosebumps series. Using the term or numbers or whatever you want to call it, 2000 was like very popular at this time. Even like the mid 90s, people were saying something 2000, to make it seem futuristic. But this one, Goosebumps 2000 series, came out with number 11, Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls. I've never read any of the Goosebumps 2000 books, but I definitely plan on it. Just a few more things to talk about. Sorry, this one's been a long one. It's been fun, though. Talk about some of the kids' meals toys. Happy Meal came out, Happy Meal. That restaurant Happy Meal? McDonald's came up with the Happy Meal toys for The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, if you remember that one. Great Disney movie. The first one was obviously the best, but they had a series of 8 stuffed animals based on characters from the movie. Burger King came out with 5 toys that were based on the Toonsylvania TV show. It was on Fox Kids. I never watched that, though. But it was a cartoon that was on, Steven Spielberg was in charge of that. I've never seen that one. Wendy's had Animaniacs toys, a set of 6 one based on that series, and of course the series is coming to an end, but getting the toys out before it's gone. KFC had Pokemon toys that were released, and this was a different than normal, like, kids meal stuff. You get like one a month, and then they change. Normally, sometimes it would go on a little bit longer, but for like 3 months straight, KFC had a different Pokemon toy or something, each month. I think the first month was like little plush toys, or maybe little rubber toys. I can't remember what they were, because I wasn't going to KFC at this time, sadly, and I didn't like Pokemon. But I know the last month they had Pokemon cards. I don't know if they were like the regular Pokemon cards, or if they're just like special, like KFC collectors ones that really can't use in the series. I don't know. Like I said, not a Pokemon fan. Pizza Hut had toys based on the Animorphs show, which I think was a Saban creation, just like Power Rangers and VR Troopers and that type of thing. They had like different like utensils, like writing utensils, like markers and pens, and there was like a message decoder. And then Taco Bell had these things called Power Rings. They were like a set of toys where you could like build various things. I couldn't really tell from the packaging what they were, but a lot of different options there if you're going out to eat. But the last thing I want to touch on is our Saturday morning cartoons and Nickelodeon lineups. Haven't done a Saturday morning lineup in a while. I pick a random date, and it happened to be a Saturday. I was like, cool, I get to talk about Saturday morning cartoons again. Even though I will say, at this time, I wasn't watching many Saturday morning cartoons or Nickelodeon. At the end of 1998, I was getting older, and my brothers were watching this stuff. I was just more listening to music, getting into that more than anything. But I will go through these lineups, see if I remember some of this stuff. This is November 21st of 1998, and again, it's a Saturday, obviously. We're not going to watch Saturday morning cartoons on Friday morning because they don't have them. But we're going to take a look at ABC's lineup here. We got Disney's Hercules. I remember this one. Obviously, it's a series based on the Hercules movie, which is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. Probably second. My first one's Fox and the Hound. Then we got Disney's Doug, part of the One Saturday Morning, if you remember that from Disney. This is after Disney and ABC had merged. So, but I remember watching. I watched this the other day on a block of ABC Saturday morning cartoons. It may have been from this time or maybe '99, but the Doug just was not the same. The theme song was completely different, which sucked. But the material it was not as good as Nickelodeon's Doug. It really wasn't. It's not just because I like Nickelodeon more. It really get anybody to watch these, and the quality just went downhill. Then we got Recess, which I never really got into that cartoon. Same with Pepper Ann. The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, again, not one of my things. Squiggle Vision, never heard of that. 101 Dalmatians is a series. Obviously seen the cartoon movies and the live action movie back then. I haven't seen the new one or anything. But, I never watched the series. We go to CBS, we got Franklin, never watched that really. Anatole, if that's how it's pronounced, never heard of that. Dumb Bunnies, okay, I've never heard of these. Flying Rhino Junior High, Birds, Mythic Warriors, Guardians of the Legend. I never heard of any of those. Like, you guys have, sorry, ESPN, you're a little late. I just did ABC's. But like I said, if you guys know those and you like them, sorry, I'm not trying to crap on them. Just never heard of any of them. Like, not just never seen them and never heard of them. And we got Fox, the Mr. Potato Head show. I briefly remember that. Not too much about it. Speaking of what I was talking about earlier, Power Rangers in Space, the series finale, actually. Countdown to Destruction Part 2. So it's kind of cool. I was just talking about that night. Like, I don't look at these lineups ahead of time. So literally, the finale was that morning. Wow. Then we got Godzilla the series. Never watched that. It was based on, like, the Godzilla movie that just came out. I think it was Godzilla or Godzilla 2000, whatever it was called. But it came out in '98, and that was popular. And they came out with the cartoon series. Never was really into that. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episode, The Beetle Invasion. So I guess they were showing a classic Power Rangers episode there. And then a premiere, well, network, they always call it network television premiere when they show a movie on network TV for the first time. This is Casper, A Spirited Beginning, the 1997 movie. So they showed that in the morning. So it's pretty cool there. And then we moved to NBC, which I was never a fan of, hardly ever, because especially in, the early to mid and then the later 90s, it was all teenage stuff. And even though I was a teenager at this time, I still didn't get into these shows. Saved by the Bell, The New Class, it was okay. I've seen a couple episodes. Then we get into stuff like I've never watched. Hang Time, One World, City Guys, another episode of Hang Time, and NBA Inside stuff because I didn't care about basketball. So like I said, didn't really care for NBC's Saturday morning lineups. The WB, The New Batman Adventures. I love this one. Not as good as the original Batman the Animated Series, but it was still a pretty good one. Then we got Superman the Animated Series. I actually like that one too. The New Batman Adventures again. Men in Black the series. That was a pretty good one. It wasn't the best, but it was okay for what it was. Then we got Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain, as I just talked about. It kind of went downhill when they had involved Elmira in that for some reason. Then we got the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. Sylvester and Tweety Solve Mysteries. And then we got Hysteria, which I briefly remember, but don't remember like actually watching it. Just remember seeing previews. But yeah, that's Saturday morning TV. And if you got cable or you're watching Nickelodeon, you will have seen these. And of course, I'm going to start at midnight, where the lineup starts with Nick at Night stuff. We got the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Newhart, Dick Van Dyke Show, Bob Newhart Show, which I guess is different than Newhart, I guess. The Wonder Years, Happy Days, I love that one. Laverne and Shirley, I Love Lucy, one of my mom's favorites. Bewitched, Mary Tyler Moore Show again. And then at 6 a.m. we start with Nick Jr., even though it was Saturday. I remember this time on the weekends too. We start with Gullah Gullah Island, which I love that show. Then Blue's Clues, of course, a staple of mid to late 90s Nickelodeon. The Webulous World of Dr. Seuss, I never watched. You're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown, I didn't watch because I know, kill me now, but I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Brown. I'm sorry. Then it looks like from 8 until noon, we've got, it says Nicktoons TV. So this is where they would just put on different Nicktoons. You know, all the Nicktoons, Doug, Rugrats. I don't know if they were doing Ren and Stimpy at this time, because that had been regulated to Snick, even though it was an original Nicktoon. But I mean, Hey Arnold, Rocko's Modern Life. I'm probably missing a couple that had been Nicktoons by then. But yeah, just a block of 4 hours of Nicktoons. And then at noon, we get an hour of Tiny Toon Adventures, which was on reruns by then. So this wasn't the original ones that was ending. And that was Animaniacs that was ending. Sorry, Tiny Toon Adventures already ended. I get them confused because, you know, obviously they're all Warner Brothers properties. But after Tiny Toon Adventures, then we get another hour of, in the same universe, we get the Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Then one of my favorite shows of all time at 2, we got What Would You Do, hosted by Mark Summers. Like a variety / game show. Love that. And then 2:30, Wild and Crazy Kids. Again, another, it's kind of like Field Day meets game show. A really good show. And then we get 3 o'clock, we get Inspector Gadget, of course, all-time favorite cartoon. 3:30, and this is a good lineup here. Hey Dude was on. I love that TV show. The Adventures of Pete and Pete, I was never big on that. Sorry, not a fan. I know a lot of people are like obsessed with that show. It's just not one of mine. One called You're On. Never remember that one. Then we got Are You Afraid of the Dark at 5 p.m. The Tale of the Long Ago Locket. I remember that one. Then we get the Wonder Years, which just seems really strange to have at 5:30 on Nickelodeon, especially in the late 90s. And the Brady Bunch. That's weird. Then we got Rocko's Modern Life. Doug, the good one. Hey Arnold, I was never really a fan. And then we get Snick at 8. But this is not the Snick I remember. No Are You Afraid of the Dark even. We start with the Angry Beavers. That was a Nicktoon. It was season finale. I've never really was into that show. I think Cat Dog was another Nicktoon I was thinking of. But that's not on here. It's popped in my head. 8:30, all that. Special guest Ice Cube. I love watching all that. Keenan and Kel, of course, spun off of all that. And then Animorphs at 9:30. So no Ren and Stimpy and no Are You Afraid of the Dark. My two favorite, those with all that and Keenan and Kel was the perfect Snick lineup. Or you can even swap Clarissa Explains It All in there with one of those, you know, I don't know, maybe swap all that out. I don't know which of those versions I'd like the best, but that's the perfect Snick lineup to me. But then at 10 we go back to Nick at Night, of course, the Brady Bunch, the Wonder Years, which were just on Nickelodeon, so it was just weird to see that in the middle of the day for Nickelodeon. You'd think, you know, some of their bigger shows would be on then. And then we Happy Days, and then we end with Laverne and Shirley. And then I know it's been a long podcast, I'm sorry, but we're going to end with the last thing. We're going to talk about TGIF. Their big show at the time was Two of a Kind, which was the Olsen twin. You know, the big thing was the Olsen twins coming back to TGIF. You know, ever since they'd, you know, Full House, and they'd gone on and do all their teen movies and books and all that, and you know, they were coming back for a show. It only lasted one season. It wasn't a very good show apparently, but doing so made Boy Meets World, which was their biggest show at the time, you know, play second fiddle to them. Boy Meets World, as big as it got, only got the main, you know, the first spot is the main spot on TGIF. You know, it's the lead into everything. It's, you know, the first thing you sit down to watch if you're watching it. It only got that position one time, and that was I think it was the second to last season, or maybe the last season. But it was the season after this, when it should have been this year, but, you know, the big thing was the Olsen twins are coming back. Well, they didn't do nothing. Meanwhile, Boy Meets World is second. They were in their sixth season when they first started going to college. The main, you know, Topanga, Corey, and Sean. But, of course, a lot of people didn't like that. I didn't mind the college years, you know. It's not like Saved by the Bell college years bad level. One of the episodes from this season, though, was really memorable. Speaking of the Wonder Years, Fred Savage, Ben Savage, the main character, Corey's, who played him, Ben Savage, well, his real-life brother, Fred Savage, which, of course, you know, people known him from years, like I said, mostly from the Wonder Years. He plays a college professor that basically tries to force himself on Topanga, you know, because obviously in the show, they're real-life brothers, but in the show, they're not. He's just another professor. You know, so Corey has to, you know, defend Topanga's honor pretty much. So I definitely remember that. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which used to be like, for a while was like the big show on TGIF, were relegated to the 3rd spot. They were in season 3. And Brother's Keeper, which I have no memory of at all, only lasted a season. So they were on last. But yeah, sorry, a lot of stuff to talk about this week. Hope I didn't bore you with any of it. And sorry if it's a little too long. Next week we'll be on episode 48, going back 5 years to July of 1993. And this is going to be our 8th trip through 93. So getting close to having almost a full year's worth. Again, once I get a full year's worth of 1 year, the next time I do that year will be kind of like a recap, not of the episodes, but of stuff that happened that year. Like music, I'll give the top 10 of that year's songs. Wrestling, I'll give like the awards, top video games, most watched TV, that type of thing. Just kind of, surmise everything into one. Like I said, it's not gonna be a clip show. I'm not gonna give the best of the ones I did for just, kind of just a recap the whole year type thing, and then I'll be done with that year. So 8th one next week. At this time, like I said, it's July 1993. I was 9 years old. The summer, obviously, getting ready for 4th grade. So that'll be next time. Check out all the other videos. Thank you for joining me, whether you're here on Facebook, YouTube, or listening on Spotify. Sorry, I got the hiccups there. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.